and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. This is episode 29, and today we are talking about the 5 powerful skills to control your emotions and confidently create happier marriage experiences. Today's episode is a continuation of the theme of this month, which is communication and conflict resolution. If you have not yet listened to episode 28, let me encourage you to do so, because on that episode, I cover the topic of 5 proven ways to get your spouse to talk and listen to you. That is something that I have heard so many couples complain about, or a spouse complain about, and that is they don't feel heard. They don't feel like their spouse is listening to them. And so I covered that in that episode, and episode 28, and it's 5 proven ways to get your spouse to talk and listen to you. Now, what you're going to hear on today's episode, that we're going to talk about the 5 powerful skills to control your emotions and confidently create a happier marriage experience. You may not agree with everything I say or the way that I say them, or some things that I bring in as illustrations, right? But listen, that is one of the things that this show is about, right? Is to bring in out of the box thinking, or to somehow stir things up, right? Is to cause there to be, for you to think, and not just this plain vanilla way of just hearing a podcast over and over again. No, I want to stir up your emotions. But here's the good news, that no matter what happens, you're guaranteed to have a very solid landing. That I guarantee for you as you listen. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com, and our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode, as is in every other episode. So stay tuned.
So, the big question is this: how is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up, or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage podcast. Today, as I mentioned, we are talking about the 5 powerful skills to control your emotions and confidently create happier marriage experiences. Now, you may, or I mentioned before, may not agree, but again, I want to provoke you to start thinking a bit more critical, because here's what happened. Maybe what you've been doing so far, the reason why it's not working is because you're doing everything that everybody else is saying, right? They're saying almost the same thing over and over again, and you're just trying, and again, it's not your fault. You know, it's not your fault for the most part that it's not working. So I want to mention that you're going to hear me go in that direction. But I also want to remind you that if you want to watch a shorter episode of this topic as a past ones as well, on my YouTube channel, Kingsley Grant, you can go there and watch me as I break down some of these topics on YouTube on a video format. But make sure you also subscribe, like, and click on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of the video broadcasts that are being put out there on YouTube. And make sure whatever you do as you listen to this episode, to stick around to the end, because I have a special gift for you, just for sticking around. So make sure you do so, okay? So my friend, thanks you for joining me on this episode. And we're talking about the 5 powerful skills to control your emotions. Now, here's what I find, that a lot of times in relationships, one of the things is not so much what happens in the relationship, is what you do about what happens in the relationship. And many times what you do is basically how you're triggered. You're emotionally driven. It's your emotions that takes over, and basically direct the traffic of the relationship and the flow of what happens. And what I find is, again, is not so much what happened, is just how you responded to what happened. Most people, or most spouses that I've worked with, have actually not responded. They've reacted. They have these knee-jerk reactions because their emotions take over. Now, I know every one of us have had those moments where our emotions got the better of us, right? Haven't you? I'm sure you have, like I have. Our emotions got the better of us, and we do things and say things because we were emotionally hijacked, and we regret them in the moment that we said them or did them, right? Now, having counseled and coached hundreds of couples over the past several years as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, and from what I've experienced in my own relationship with my wife of more than 3 decades, I believe that I'm able to talk about this topic or topics like this one with confidence from both a personal and a professional context, right? And I hope you'll see that and hear that in this episode as I present about the 5 powerful skills that you want to know, that you need, and I need, we all need to control our emotions so we can confidently create happier marriage experiences. See, sometimes people will say my marriage is not happy, or I don't feel happy in my marriage. And maybe you might be one of those persons, or you may know somebody who have said that. Maybe your spouse have said that. And they're looking to you, or you're looking to them to somehow make that change and make the marriage happier. Now, granted, I believe that everyone, in the marriage, both the husband and wife, you're both contributing to what you're experiencing. It's not just one person, it's both who are contributing to what the experiences you're now having. So what happened though, at times, is when one person is very explosive or doesn't, manage your emotions, and their emotions get the better of them, and they're not controlling their emotions, right? And they'll say, I have a short fuse, or, all kind of excuse we make up. We make up these excuses, and on the surface it sounds and look good, but really behind them, it's really is a sad explanation, right? We're simply saying we have no control. And my friend, that I don't buy. I don't buy that you don't have control over your emotions. It's not possible. You do have control over your emotions, because I guarantee put you in situations where the consequences are great, and the bar is set high, and what you could lose as a result if you don't control your emotion. And I can guarantee I'll see you behaving in a way that's different when the consequence of what you do is not as high, right? It matters, but it doesn't matter as greatly as if you were in another situation. So I do know that you can control and manage your emotions. The problem is we don't, and sometimes we don't, again, because we have tried what we have heard and we say it doesn't work. And we'll blame, again, our spouse, and we'll say, he or she made me do that. It's like the devil made me do it. No, of course not. You did it because you chose to. It's a choice you make. So Kingsley, you don't understand. What do you mean a choice? I've done my best in trying to manage, and so I just can't control it. Listen, you can control it if you so desire. When I give you these 5 powerful skills, it's going to require that you do some work. It's going to require that you decide that this is something that you want to do, and your marriage is worth it, right? Your marriage is worth it. Your spouse is worth it. Your children need to see this side of you. Now, I remember one time in my, many years ago, that my kids were much younger, my son and my daughter. And I remember my son had said something or done something to my wife, his mom, and we were in the kitchen area of the house. And imagine I was standing by the counter and he was by a few feet away from me. So I saw and heard and saw for the moment what he did, my wife had a pause because she could not believe he did what he did. Now, I know he didn't really mean something very ill will or was out to truly hurt my wife, because he was an early teen, right? A preteen, early teen thereabout. And so he didn't have the rational power, the brain power to have actually, process and say, if I do this, my mom will be this upset and I'm gonna. No, it's just a reaction. It's just what kids do, right? Kids say the darndest things. Kids do things without thinking many times because they don't have that the brain power yet to be able to manage their emotions and their thinking process as we as adults do, right? But here's what happened. When I experienced what he did to my wife, I reacted. I reacted at the moment. I actually screamed at him in a manner where I saw him. Imagine a father, right? A male figure. This is where I think why it's so important to have a father and a mother in a home raising those children, because there's something about when daddy speaks. There's something when that man speaks that causes the children to somehow respond differently than they would respond to moms. Now, again, in every family, there are exceptions to what I'm saying, but for the most part, this is typically what it's like. Kids respond differently to a male, and especially a father figure, an authoritative figure in their life than they do a female. And I remember that my wife had looked at him in a way and almost like, could not believe it. And I just jumped in right away. And I knew that moment when I screamed at him, I forgot what I said, but it doesn't matter what I said. It's what I saw. Not what I said, but what I saw. What I saw was my son. It's almost like he recoiled in the shell. He quivered. It's almost like he didn't believe and couldn't believe that his dad would scream at him that way, because it never happened before. And so what happened is my emotions got the better of me. I got emotionally hijacked. And so, of course, without going too much into this story, I want to say quickly that I did apologize. I did have to come back to my son. And it was the first time that I remember deeply apologizing and asking my son to forgive me. Now, that took a lot of courage, because it's not something that I grew up seeing from my own father. He never ever apologized for anything. So I didn't grow up seeing that. So I know sometimes our emotions can get the better of us, like it did for me. And when those times does happen, it should be the rare exceptions. It should not be the norm. It should not be where that's the way it always is, right? To me, when that's true, that means you're not managing your emotions. Your emotions are managing you. What I love about the Bible, one of the things I love what the Bible says is this, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of self-control, right? And one of the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. God, He knew and He knows the importance for us to have self-control in our lives. And so He's given us the ability, and not only that, but He wants to help us, because our emotions can truly destroy so many things, destroy so many relationships. And maybe your relationship today is being destroyed because somebody, you or your spouse, is not controlling and managing your emotions the way that you should. So what are the 5 powerful skills? Now, the first one I want to mention, it's one that I truly believe in very much. But here's what happened. Many people, I wouldn't say they don't have the skill, but is not aware of the skill and actually utilize the skill in their relationships. And that is self-awareness, right? It's self-awareness. Now, self-awareness simply means the ability to manage or regulate your emotions and the emotions of those around you, so you can have a better outcome, the outcome that you prefer, a more positive outcome in the relationship, not destructive, but constructive. When you're self-aware, right? And that's why I think emotional intelligence is so important, because it highlights self-awareness. And when you practice self-awareness, but here's what happened. It allows you to bring your emotions, right? Your attention to the present moment. And that's why people would say alongside the self-awareness is you're practicing being present or mindfulness, right? I would just say being present, because it allows you to be in the moment, and become aware of your thoughts and your feelings and your surroundings. So when you're being self-aware, you are taking in more than one dimension. You are very present with what's happening around you, reminding yourself of where you're at, reminding yourself of who it is you're interacting with. And these people ought to be treated with dignity and with respect because they're created in God's image. And I did not do that with my son. I did not treat him with respect and dignity that day. And that's why I had to go back and apologize to him. And many times, if you as a couple, if you as a spouse is not operating with self-awareness, and I put that as number one because it's so important, this powerful skill could transform your marriage if you're able to implement it the way it's ought to be implemented. So it's being present, being mindful of where you are with your thoughts, your feelings, your surroundings, and then being aware of the emotions that are at play at that time, right? That's number one. Number two is to identify and label your emotions. Majority of people in the world do not have a hard time. I think I saw a study that says 2/3 of the world's population cannot truly identify their emotions, much less labeling their emotions. They know they have feelings. They know they're feeling something because, of course, their behavior reflects that. But what happened is that most people don't know. They will use their thoughts or their opinions and call that an emotion, right? And that is so different. It's so much not the way it is. Here's my rule of thumb that I teach many times when I teach my clients or I'm doing a presentation, a training. I will give a rule of thumb to all of my clients and say, here's how you can know that you're talking about your emotions. If your emotions ought to be expressed in 3 or 4 words maximum. Anything beyond that is your thoughts, your opinion that you're given, not your emotions you're talking about. For example, a person may say, I feel that you don't listen to me. Now, because they use the word feeling or I feel, they think they're describing their emotions. That's not true. They are stating an opinion. They're simply saying, I really think, or I'm observing that you don't really listen to me. That's what they're saying. That's your opinion. Now, here's what happened. That opinion, that thought is what does that call? How do they feel when they know or they see or they conclude that their spouse, their husband, their wife is not listening to them, not paying attention, right? It's that underlying feeling is what they ought to have. And they should now say how they feel about it. For example, they can say, I feel very sad. So 4 words, I feel very sad, 4 words. Or I could say, I feel sad, 3 words. The reason why I use 4, because if you want to amplify the feelings with the word, very sad or deeply saddened, then you use 4 words. But what happened is when you're able to identify what your feelings and label that, you have a better chance of managing it, of being able to know what to do. So if I say, I'm feeling very upset. So I'm beginning to say, okay, I'm feeling upset. Well, what it is that's making me feel upset? And then we can begin to unpack that. And that's what I do in my programs, in my coaching, in helping people to unpack and give them a better path forward so they can manage and control their emotions. And then when you can control your emotions, you can confidently create happier marriage experiences. Okay. Number 3, using coping mechanisms. Now, what I'm talking about this is during the time that you're experiencing an interaction with your spouse, then the coping mechanism is what it is you're using to cope so you do not create a conflict or a hostile situation, right? It helps you to calm down. It's what calms you down and also allows you to find perspective, an alternative way of looking at something, because in the moment, your brain is only most times interpreting what's happening through one lens, one dimension. And you're not thinking about how else could you look at this? What's another alternative way of explaining this? What's another perspective that I could take? If your emotions are driving this, it does not give you space, a buffer to be able to have that kind of thought process. And that's why a coping mechanism, what it does, it allows you to remain calm, give you and allow you to have a moment for perspective and being reflective. So, for example, I strongly encourage my clients to use deep breathing. Now, it's not just any kind of deep breathing, because there's a certain way to breathe. And of course, I won't take time to go through this, but there's a certain way to breathe that allows your whole system to truly be so oxygenated that it calms everything down. Your brain calms down, right? Because what happens, you're becoming emotionally hijacked. And when you're able to take a deep breath and breathe the proper way, right? The proper way, then you're going to be able to manage strong emotions. So breathing is one technique and I think is one of the most important technique. There are other things you could do like physical activities, but I believe breathing is one of the first one that is always available to you no matter where you are. And that's where you're going to use to calm your body down. So we talked about self-awareness and being present. We talk about identifying and labeling your emotions. And now we talk about coping mechanisms. Number 4. Now, this one is where it's something that you would do on an ongoing basis, because it is not just an immediate thing. It's something that you have to be very intentional and make an effort for. And that is to seek support from friends, family, and or a mental health professional. Okay. Now, what it is you're allowing this network to do is to kind of create a sense of accountability, right? Or just a sense to help you to navigate and talk through some things in a more sensible manner. You know, I grew up hearing this, that 2 heads are better than 1. And so many times you might need to have 2 heads and to be able to look at something from a perspective that's more helpful than if you're only looking at it from your own perspective. And what happened is friends or families, a mental health professional are there to become the mirror that can reflect to you what it is that you're thinking and provide you with an alternative way of thinking or seeing something that you may not have thought about. And so having that network around you creates accountability, is supportive. It's also a place just to vent where you're not necessarily doing it with your own family or your husband, your wife, and then cause a conflict. So it provides you an alternative, a place you can go where you feel safe enough and talk about those things and get a perspective, because they might be able to help you see something the way you've not seen it before. And you can take that back to your relationship, maybe with an apology, or maybe with some clarity, or in a more calmer way, present something than if you were doing it all by yourself. The 5th powerful way is to develop healthy ways, right? Develop healthy ways of how to communicate or express what you're experiencing, your feelings, to process your emotions, right? So sometimes it's not only what you say, but it's how you say what you say, right? Sometimes you might need a way to process through journaling. Maybe it's through painting, something that is more allows you to while you're thinking and you maybe have so upset. One of the things I do not recommend, I know some people do, but I don't. And that is they'll say, hey, go to a gym and just punch, get a punching bag and just, hit it so hard. But what I find is what that does, it reinforces the anger you're experiencing. Because the more you're thinking about punching that bag, sometimes you may see that's punching your own spouse, and you're taking that out on the bag or on them. So to me, it's unhealthy, because you're building up in your brain more expressions, more thoughts that only cause you to feel anger, and you're hitting the bag harder because your brain is now processing in a very negative way. So I don't recommend punching anything as one way to manage your emotions, especially that of anger. So it could be journaling, right? It's just something that provides an outlet that you can process these difficult feelings so you can gain some insight. It could be meditation. It could be prayer, which is a great one, to pray and take that to God and talk to God about what you're experiencing and let His Holy Spirit kind of give you wisdom and also calm you down And maybe he may reference a scripture you can go and read at the same time. But you've got to develop healthy ways, because this is one way to be shown that you are in charge and not that something else is in charge of you, right? Not letting your emotions be the boss of you, deciding when, how, and where. You're now taking charge of the situation. So these 5 powerful skills, I believe, if you're able to practice them, and again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts? Do you see where this makes sense for your relationship? Have you tried any of these, or are you trying them? How is that working out for you? I would love for you to give some feedback and make sure we hear from you about your thoughts on this. Maybe you don't agree. That's also welcome. So make sure we have that conversation. So the 5 powerful skills are practice self-awareness, being present, right? Being present and self-awareness. Number 2, to identify and label your emotions. Label and identify your emotions. Number 3, use coping mechanisms. Number 4, seek support from a network of friends or family, and even a mental health professional. And number 5, develop healthy ways to express and process your emotions. I believe if you're able to take these 5 powerful ways and begin to implement, you would see the difference in your marriage, I think, over in a very short time. You can make a difference. You by yourself can bring change in your marriage. You don't need for your spouse to necessarily come on board yet. You begin to change yourself in these areas, it will create a change in your marriage as well, right? Is that whole butterfly effect. You may have heard that, where a butterfly is in another country and it begins to flap its wings. And the whole idea is that wings being flapped, and it begins to generate some, like almost like a ripple effect. And the ripple effects begin to spread wider and wider and wider, and it reaches very far away. So the ripple effect of you doing these things is that a butterfly, you become the butterfly, do flap your wing and see your wings and see what difference it makes in your marriage. And again, let's hear from you what's happening as a result of that. So my friend, again, thank you for listening. And remember, by simply staying to the end, as I said before, I want you to get the gift I have for you. And the announcer will tell you how to get your copy of a free ebook that I have provided just for you, because I think it will be helpful for you and your marriage. And also, before she comes, let me invite you to check out our new website at happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com, where you'll find all the past podcasts and the blog posts. That's all there. But also, you have an opportunity to take a marriage assessment test. Very, very short, very brief, very simple, and get to find out where your marriage is. What's just going to gauge the state of your marriage. That's also available. So my friend, thank you for listening. And the announcer will now tell you how to get your free gift I promised you at the beginning of the episode, and by staying to the end. So here she comes to tell you what that is.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1, make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2, subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3, get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.